I'm Jason Hurd. I've had releases on labels like Jackie's, Defected, Tool Room, and perhaps one of the biggest, most influential disco house labels ever, Subliminal Records. Today, I'll show you how to turn a disco sample into a peak time, modern disco house banger. We'll compare old school sampling with modern, much easier techniques in Ableton using simpler. By the end, you'll know how the top Beatport records are made, and you'll have the fully editable MIDI project I use in this video. I'll also give you another version using only Ableton stock plugins, so you can download the two projects to use as a template if you're a Subtone subscriber. Now, this track is from my client Idium. They came into my pop-up studio in Manchester and I showed them how to go crate digging properly. I'll show you how we split the stems, used simpler, and turned it into a club track which is being played by some of the biggest house music DJs. If you're interested in the pop-up studio sessions in Manchester, getting your tracks mixed and mastered, or one-to-one mentorship via Zoom, email info@subtonemusicacademy.com. Check the description below for the Subtone subscription, which is only £10 a month and has over 80 hours worth of tutorials and project templates like this to download. Okay, let's dive in.
Montague, I love you. Sweet 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 Montague, I love you. Do I love you? Do I love you? Life without you.
Okay, so before we get into it, I think if you really want to gain a bit of credibility with labels, you've really got to crate dig a little bit deeper. You know, all you're hearing on the Beatport charts is copies of Junior Jack records and the same sample that's been sampled lots and lots and lots of times. So I think finding samples that haven't been used is a really good way of gaining respect off the labels. And crate digging and going through the records, what you're looking for. So this is what I ask all my clients to do who are making this kind of music. And they find it hard. It takes time. You know, people don't want to put in all that time and energy into finding something. You know, you can listen to 20 records and they've either been done a million times or there's just nothing in them which you can grab hold of. So what I'm going to do now, first of all, is show you like what you should do. You should find a track that you think, okay, has this been used? Has it not been used? And the key part to it, specifically back in the day, was finding parts of the track that you could loop and sample or chop out that would be the backing of a track that you could put a vocal over. Or if it was an instrumental, finding the different parts and chopping them up, which I'll show you shortly. So my clients, Idium from Sheffield, they brought this track in. We'd worked online and they brought the track in. And then I showed them what that you have to do, which is what I'm going to show you today. Okay, so first of all, we've got this track here, Romeo and Juliet by Alex R. Konstantinos. Okay, so it's a great track. There's so many different sections to it, as there is with lots of these records. A lot of the classic records that were on Subliminal Records, you know, and other labels like that, and Z Records, they had different parts. So you might have 4 different tracks out of one track. They just use different parts of the track. So I think what you need to be doing is looking for tracks that haven't been oversampled and overused. So as a young producer, how do you know whether it's been sampled and what's been done? And this is an easy way of doing it. There's a website called Who Sampled. So you type in the name, Songs That Sampled Romeo and Juliet by Alex R. Constantinos, and then it's got a list of the tracks, okay? So you can go through these and you can listen to the tracks and see if they're using the same part of the sample that you've used. Was there something that was absolutely massive that makes you think, oh no, we can't do that, unless you want to, which is what a lot of people are doing nowadays. It's the same samples repeated. And go through it. So like one of my favorite tracks by Michael Gray, Flawless, the ones, use a different part of the sample to what we're using. And I went through all these and listened to them. And there wasn't really anything that stuck out to me that used it in the way that we're using it. And that's good, because it doesn't make the label owners, just the A&Rs, go, oh, that's just a rip-off of that. That's just a rip-off of that. And while sometimes making something like that might be good because DJs will play it, okay, it's not necessarily what's going to attract the A&Rs from the labels. And that's really, I think, what you want to be thinking about more than just, oh, I'll just do a copy of that, an updated version, and play it. You're not going to gain respect by doing that. There's producers, they're just doing that, and you're not seeing them produce stuff which is original and inspiring. And a lot of the labels, even though they want what's big, they're looking for people that are using their initiative and creating something fresh. And there's that many tracks to sample, you know, you could look at this. So the key thing to this is, you know, you're going to sample a record. The label needs to be able to hear it to make it think, like, is it going to be worthwhile trying to clear this sample? Because this is the key thing. There's only a few labels out there now that are going to clear these samples. And I do a lot of work with Let There Be House, and you know, they just don't have the infrastructure to go spending all the time and money to be trying to clear these samples. Whereas somebody like Phil's Paradise, Tool Room, they have a really good infrastructure to do this kind of thing. And if you send it to those labels and they then don't want to sign it, you're in a bit of a position like, what do I do with it? Like these guys are. So they are having to give this record away for free. Or just give it to the other DJs. And they've done that, and they've got great results from people giving the feedback on it. But it's never going to see the light of day. So that's something to think about, is what you're making this for. You're making it just for give the other DJs, or for your own personal DJ set, or do you want to get it signed? And, you know, ultimately, if you get the DJs playing it, a label might come in and want to sign it. So what they've done is give it to a few big name DJs who are playing it now. They're trying to build up some traction. And then hopefully a label will come in and sign it, and who's got the infrastructure to be able to go to the labels that own this and clear the sampling, which can be A, problematic, B, time consuming, and C, expensive. You just never know what people are going to come back with. So what do you do? Well, the easiest way to go around this is to get your track and pull it into your Ableton project, okay? And what you want to do really is you want to get the first beat of the bar. And a lot of this stuff was like real drums and reels. So what you want to be doing is you want to be getting this in time. Now, back in the day, if you listen to a lot of the old tracks, they were slopping, they were out of time. So is that a part of the appeal, what you're looking for? Or do you want to make it a bit easier? I think nowadays it does seem to be a little bit easier. So what you want to do is you want to go into the track and you want to warp it, and you want to get it in time, because if you're doing it this way and not using a sampler, really, you want to be getting it in time and making life easy for yourself. Just get it perfectly in time on the kick and leave what's in between the kick a little bit loose, because what that will do is give it that kind of old school feel, slightly sloppy. You might want to take some things out of time, but if you've got kicks on every kick, then you'll want it in time. If it's taken from a break, which is even better, then, you know, it does, it being slightly out of time might be a part of the attraction. So what do you do? So you get it in, you get the first beat, double click on it, let's warp it, Complex Pro. Go to it, create the first marker, okay? So 111 from here. Warp from here. We don't know the tempo, okay? And this seems to have got it in time. That's really good, actually. Kind of there. It's going to be a bit sloppy. So what you do is you get it almost in time to work with your track, okay? And then what you do is you go through it. I'm going to pull it back this way. And go through and listen to the track and listen to the parts that you might want to sample, okay? Now, the other way of doing this is pulling it into the simpler, which I'm going to show you next. But I think if you want to make your life a bit easier, getting it in time here, flattening it, then pulling in a sampler is really, really going to help you. Plus, what we're going to do now is go through the track and try to find the parts of the track which work for you, which you want to sample. So if you're crate digging, what you want to do is go to the tracks and just listen through them, because these tracks have little bits that are just like, oh, wow, that's really nice. Oh, that's great. Oh, wow. You know, we might want different parts of it for different things, like stabs might just be a stab that we use. And we know it's all in key if it's not got key changes. So what you do is you listen to it.
Most excellent and lamentable tragedy of Romeo and Juliet, newly corrected, augmented, and amended.
So you might go, okay, yeah, I like that. So I'm just going to get that, Command D, and just put blue. And then we just listen to it, go all the way through and find the parts that you really like, okay? It's always better to have them in breaks with no drums, and it's easier to do. But just listen through and see the parts that you might quite like, okay? Okay, so that's a really good part, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to that, press Command D just to separate it, and I'm going to colour it. And there's two things we can do here. We might want to use that loop, or we might just want to get that, pull it down here onto a separate channel if we're not using a sampler, and just put an EQ on. Take out the bottom end, add a bit of a reverb. And we can use that throughout the track. Say we found another part of the track which is just a string loop, we can use that as a tool on top of that other loop. So it's not just about finding one loop. Go through it and try and listen to things and see, oh, what can I use this for, like I just did then? And then this might be a good section for a middle eight for something, and then go through it. You might go, that's really good. Command D. And obviously I'm flipping through this. I would go through it all the way through bit by bit. Now, I like that. It's okay. But it's got that big guitar in the back of it, but it might come in useful, so I'll keep that separately. and just keep going through it and just label the parts. I think that's out of James Bond, that. So you might want to get them 2 sections. Command E. And you might go, yeah, that's really good. You know, you've got that part, you've got this part. It's not really for me. Okay, wow, I like that bit of vocal. I like it a lot, but I'm not sure of the tracking behind it. I want to use this or a different part of it, but I want to use this vocal. So back in the day, we might have to filter it all out to get the vocal there and put it over the old string sample, but we're not back in the day, you know. This is where things get better. So what you can do now is, what I would do, and what we did on this track is, we can get it, we can go right click. I would go through it all, find all the bits that you like, mark them out with the times, duplicate it, okay, pull that all the way across, make sure it's in time. First of all, go all the way through and just double check these. So like you have to go into this and make sure, maybe put a kick underneath and listen to it with the kick and see if there's any flanging or anything you like or you don't like, and just get it right with the parts that you like. Okay, so what you do is you right click on it, separate stems from your audio tracks. So others is your music. Okay, I'm going to separate them all. I want them high quality and just separate. And what this is going to do, this is going to create 4 separate tracks, which means we can remix the record with the parts. And this is an amazing tool for things like this, because a lot of the time, because the drums are so sloppy, sometimes you just can't quite get the track right. And then when you quantize it, you kind of lose the feel. Whereas with this, we can quantize the drums, but have the music still unquantized. So we still get a bit more feeling depending what sounds right. So we'll separate that, then fast forward. Okay, so now what we have is the separate stems, okay? And we can just listen to them. And again, we would have already identified the key areas of where we liked the music, where we like the strings, where we like the vocals, any things that we might want to chop out without the drums. And because we've spent the time doing that first of all, we've got them all here separately. So let's have a listen to this vocal quickly. And young affection gates to be his heir. So that's a bit of the vocal that we liked, but we didn't like the music, the strings in the background, so we liked some of the other strings and a different part of the track. And what you can do is you can go and work this way and chop things up, and you know, like I did with the stab, just find different elements that you can use, like as effects, so like as transitions, or just one sound with a big delay on it, or something filtered really down, looped. There's so many different variables that you can do now. Now you've got stem splitting, you know, and we haven't even gone into a sampler yet. So this is the simplest way to do it. Find the music loop, okay? Then find the vocal that you like and get other bits out of it. Don't just stop there, which is what most people do. Go in and go, okay, what else can I use? You know it's in key, unless there's a key change. So little bits you can get and chop out, just like I just showed you then with that stab. So there's that. So why did we get the bass out? So here's a quick one. So if you're not a musician, you want the bass to follow it. So you've got the bass here. Okay. And obviously we're not going to use the strings in that part, but what you would do is get Melodyne, put it in. And then you just copy the notes for the section that you're going to use. Obviously, I'm not going to use this section because we weren't mad on the music in this section, but this is exactly what we did. And the Melodyne tells you the exact notes. Put it into melodic. And then just copy these into MIDI and then use that in a soft synth. So, because a lot of these tracks, like this one especially, doesn't have lots of sub bass and in it. So we want to add that because we're making modern day tracks. You don't have to. You know, you might just do like what Mark Knight and James Hurd do, and they just have a big kick which supplies all the bottom end. The choice is yours. There's no right and there's no wrong. It's what works best for you in your track. So that's what we did with this. And then you've got all your elements for your track. All you need to add then is your arrangement, your effects, and your drums, which we'll go into next. Okay. The next thing to do, which I recommend that you do, okay, massively, and this is how we used to do it back in the day, is find them sections, put it in time-ish, just for ease, and then drag it into a simpler. So what I've done here, I've dragged it in, I've not put it in time. And what you can do is, there's 3 different modes here: classic, one shot, and slice. Like, go into slice and it'll slice it automatically. Okay. You've got by transient, by beat, by region, and manual. Now, if it was a perfectly in time track, you know, by beat or region might be good, or transient. But because it's not, I find it problematic. But have a play with each of them. But what I know, because I went into the track originally, got it in time, and found the parts that I really liked, I knew that them parts were there. Okay. The good thing about this is what we can do is find the different areas with different strings and different samples and different sounds and put them all onto one key and then play them back in to see if we can make something out of it like this. So what I've done is I've gone into it, I've gone to manual, I've found the parts that I wanted to use, and I've assigned them to the key. So it starts at C3. So this is the first one I've done. So, and then you mess around with it and you play it and you find something fun. And that's how they used to do it, the French house back in the day. And they wouldn't just use one track, you know, like cut the stab out, they'd find different parts and from different tracks and put them together. This is time consuming, you know, but you can find something really amazing that isn't just like what we've done in this track, which is just use an 8-bar loop, stick a vocal over it and drums, which is just as good. But what you can do sometimes if you do this correctly is create something magical and new. And obviously all I've done there is quickly find some transients. You could hear it was slightly out of time in part with the drums, which is why we separated them before, and find the parts that we could make a new melody out of and have different sections, but it's all from the same track. Now, again, I've done this with the drums in. You might want to do this just to the part without the drums, you know. There's so many possibilities that you can do. I'm not here to go through it all, but, you know, back in the day, that's what we did. You know, you can try the different algorithms for the warp, to see what sounds best for you. It does warp it and put it in time. You might not want to do that. You might just want to pitch it. Okay, like we used to do back in the day. The options and possibilities are pretty endless with it. It's about up to you what you want to do. And if you are releasing something that you don't want to strike on, sometimes it is better to change the pitch on it and mess around with it and put a filter on it so that people don't know what you've sampled. But in this instance, it's quite obvious what was sampled. So yeah, that's sampling. That's how we used to do it. Just get it in, find the different parts of the track, put them onto different keys. You know, so now that bit there was the end of the track. The last one there. It's about finding the different parts and trying to use your brain to think, okay, well, how could I use that? You know, that bit there might just be filtered down below or looped all the way through the track or chopped up just with that one part there. Same with the bits before, you know, there's this one. You might go, I like that. And now because we've got stems, you can chop that stab out and take the vocal off it. Easy. You know, it's just about using stems in Ableton to do this. So that's a quick look at sampling. I'm not going to go in depth about what it is, but have a play. Don't just get a sample, find 8 bars, chop it up. Go into this, you know, and find those stabs. If you do it this way without a sampler, find the stabs, find the parts you can cut out and create a simpler and see what they sound like with a delay on, with an effect on, with a flange on. Try all these different things. It's time consuming, but this is what's going to get you the best results that make A&Rs go, oh, wow, this is really cool. You know, and actually give you a lot of credibility amongst your peers. Okay, so that's the track. Quite simple, but it's always moving and it feels like it's on a journey. So I'm going to start with a sample first of all. So like most of these records that you're hearing, they have a part like a bar of the sample or a part of it looped at the beginning and then they open up. So if you look at this first part here, up to there, the sample is half loop or a quarter loop. And then that goes in and opens up here. And that gives a sense of a journey, a bit more driving at the beginning, better for mixing in. And then it opens up in this break and gives you a bit of movement. What I've done is they like this one part. Let's have a listen to that. Which you can hear isn't the part that was under that vocal. So we've got a different part of the track and it makes it a bit more interesting because, you know, back in the day, we couldn't really do this because the vocal was on top of that part and on top of that, and you have 2 sets of drums and everything else. It was really quite hard to get it to work right, even though we did do it sometimes. So we've used that part and then we use this part, which you just heard then. To be honest with you, we could have done more with this track. They only came in for a day. We did this in a day. So we could have got some stabs, find some extra parts of it, but they were more than happy with this. So again, half loop into full loop, a separate bit here. You know, we could have done more, but the guitar works really well. They really like it. Really hits before a drop and a break. And it's a great sample. So on that, we just took out the bottom end, took out a bit of the top end as well with the shelf. It was a bit bright. It was a little bit messy as they are with these stem separation things. So quite a bit of harshness taken out of the top end. And it was okay because we've got this kind of music has loops and lots of hi-hats and stuff like that. You know, it's not necessarily just like a you've got this beautiful piece of music and the vocal and that's it. This stuff has loops and big open hi-hats and lots of stuff up there. So we could do this quite harshly with Soothe and take out the frequencies that were a bit annoying and be even more annoying with the hi-hats and the drums. So Soothe, we did that. And then we've sidechained that to the lead vocal using Track Spacer. So have a quick look at that. We've just done it. Oh no. Yeah, fast attack, fast release. And we've just sidechained the whole frequency when the vocal's in. So the vocal popped a little bit more. And then we've just made it a little bit wider using the plugin Wider. And that's because we had the kick in the middle, the bass in the middle, the vocals kind of spread out a little bit, but we wanted it to be in a different position. So we made it wider with that. Let's have a listen to all that on and off. Out a bit at the top end. And we've just made it a little bit wider. That's it. And we've sidechained it to the vocal. So that was the music loop, which then goes into the music bus, okay, or the sample bus. And within the sample bus, what we've done is we put on a mutator and we've filtered it up and down. The mutator here is one of my favorite plugins. It just sounds, of all the filters I've got, it sounds more like the old school filters and off them big records on Subliminal and Azuli and all the big disco house tracks. And it's to do with the circuitry, but also I love the cutoff. The only problem with this plugin, if you do buy it, is the left and right aren't linked. So what you have to do, you have to map them to their own controllers here and control it via this here, okay? And we've used that. In fact, let's have a listen to that filter a little bit. Yeah, really like that. It's a beautiful sounding filter and it's just different. You can't get the same with auto filter really. And I've tried the Moog one in UAD, but nothing comes close to this in my opinion. You know, I've listened to a million disco tracks from back in the day and it was things like this that were done on the original box and it is different. It's got a different sound. So I love the mutator. A bit of EQ, Spectrum, I don't know why that's there. I don't use that. The guys must have used that when they brought the project with the sample in. And yeah, so then that goes into the sample bounce and we've created a journey with the automation throughout the track. So that was the sample bus, which is all the music basically. And in this, what we did in the end, we actually used the bass from the actual track. So we used the bass from the same part of the string sample and just copied it across. As you can see, we've got the half bass here and the full bass here. Let's have a listen to that. So yeah, we just went with the original one. Like I said, a lot of the time I would put this into MIDI and use a soft synth so we've got more bottom end. But in this track, what we've done is we've used a longer kick, okay? So the kick provides the bottom end in the club. So we've got that there. What if we put on the bass? We've added some parallel saturation at 57 Hertz to give a bit more bottom end. We've just cut it at the bottom end. We've used a side chain to the kick. So just so that the kick's coming through a little bit more, if there was anything there. Not that there's much in it. And we've made it mono. Again, when I'm mixing, I'm choosing everything for the position in the mix, and I wanted the bass dead in the center, so that the difference between the mono signal and the stereo spread on the strings gives this track a bit more depth and dimension, and which is what I really, really want. I want the music wide. I want the kick in the bass and the clap in the center of the track. So that's the bass. We did the low cut to create more of a journey with the bass. And that is all that was in the sample bus, is the music and the bass. And we got that from the original track, and that's really most of the track. So let's start from the top and go back into that. So we got a kick. Okay, let's have a listen to the kick. So we just got a kick with a load of bottom end that in a club is really going to fill out the bottom end. A lot of the tracks nowadays, they have the sample, they don't have a lot of bass in it, and you don't feel the bass, but in a club, they have this big round kick that you'll hear in like Mark Knight and James Hurst tracks, where you listen to it and you think there's not a lot of groove, but then in a club, it absolutely slams because it's got this massive kick in there. So we've gone halfway in between the two, found a kick that was nice and round and filled out the bottom of the track. So and what we did is we referenced to tracks that were big right now to make sure that this wasn't like an old school record, but it competed with the punch and the energy of the records like this that are topping the Beatport charts at the moment, using Metric AB there. So nice kick, a lot of round bottom end, not as big as some tracks, but bigger than other tracks. So we didn't need lots of sub bass in this track because we've got plenty of bass. Our ears are tuned into it, but we wanted the thump of the kick for the club because this is a club record, okay? We've then just got a filtered out kick in certain parts after that. And on there, we've just used a clipper. And we've just clipped it just so that we can, obviously the kick's going to be the loudest part of this track. We want to make this track quite loud. If you listen to your references, like your James Hurst stuff, you know, it's getting up to -6, sometimes -5 luffs, which is not that important. It's about how loud it sounds. So we wanted to get it as loud as possible without destroying it. So we just put a bit of a soft clipper on the kick, get an extra dB out of it. So that was the kick. We've then got the drums. I'll go from top to bottom now. Nothing on the drums. We've got the mid drums. We've got a clap. We've just used a Spectre to bring it out in the mix. Obviously, I would have added that once everything's in the mix because the clap needs to cut through in certain frequencies. Bit of reverb using the hybrid verb with a made for drums big snare. And then we've clipped it again because obviously the point in this track, which is the loudest point, will be here on the drop. So we are mixing for loudness, okay? So you've got the kick, you've got the clap, and then you've got the sample, but the bass as well. So we've sidechained the bass. We've done the best that we can do there. The bass isn't that loud. But one of the key things which a lot of people get wrong here is like with the white noise. So there's frequencies in the white noise go all the way down. So the more you can take out of the white noise but still get the effect, the better, because this is where your limiter or your compressor is going to hit the hardest, and that's where you're going to get your distortion you don't want. We've got two here, so we'll go through them later on. So yeah, we've clipped it for loudness and with the clap. Now we've then got some percussion. This music always got loops in it. Let's have a listen. What we would have done we would have got the sample in first, got the vocal, got the arrangement. We would have had the kick, the clap, and the open hat. That's it. We don't add all the drums yet. And then found the percussion that works with the sample. We've got that one, which is just topped and tailed with the EQ and sidechained. We've then got the conga. Again, which is just EQ'd. We've got a shaper box on that. What's that doing? Oh, that's the side chain in it. That must have been what they used. That must have been one of theirs. This must have been the way that they did it. We've then got a reverb and the SPL Transient Designer. It was probably a bit long, so we wanted to shorten it. So we've got the sustain and we've pulled the sustain down here. Okay. So we've not actually increased the transients, we've decreased them, the length of them. And then we've got a drum fill. Just taking out the low end so it's not creating a load of volume, and then just clipped it because that on the kick is quite loud and we wanted it quite loud, so we can take off the transients. And it's drastic. It's drastic. It's really drastic. In fact, I wouldn't normally do it like that. I'd probably do it a bit less. That's probably better there like that. Yeah, that's the mid drums. We've then got the high drums, which we've just done a low cut on and soothe because they're quite harsh. We've used a preset here. Again, a lot of this music's really harsh. I think that people still want to listen to this kind of music on Spotify. And I think there's a way around making this kind of music where it is got lots of loops, but it's easier to listen to. I just lost a mix recently. I was doing it for somebody and I took all the harshness out of the drums and it needed it. And it still had the energy, but the client had Demoitis and they wanted it. And I listened to the final mix when they released it and I was just like, oh God, it's so hard to listen to. A lot of producers, they're listening in their room and they're using the rears, but they're not feeling the track. And they're not realizing that sometimes they're thinking the energy comes from the hi-hats and the top end and it and to some degree it does for some people. But for me, you know, the energy comes from the groove and the melody of the track. And if you've just got going, you're losing the melody of the track, the feeling of the track. And you want that, the offbeat heart. But if you're going, that's how your body's moving. Right? Whereas you want your body to go ding, 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 feeling the melody of the track. So what you do is you get the sample in and the bass and you work everything to that. So you've got a bit more, when you dance into it, you dance into a groove as opposed to if that makes sense. Okay, so high drums, we've got a crash. I don't need to go into that. We've got the open hat. Like I said, we'll always start with the open hat, the kick and the clap. Just an open hat, bit of reverb in this instance, and we've clipped that because it must have been one of the loudest things in the mix. Again, I'm not going to go into clipping in this. If you want to learn about mixing for loudness, I've got a course on subtone going deep into this and why we do it and why we don't do it. So don't just copy what I'm doing and use a clipper. There's a reason why we've used a clipper there. Okay, we've then got a ride. Standard ride. I've not low cut it because we've done it on the master bus and we were short on time making this, so we did it in a day in the studio in Manchester. Okay, with a little bit of preparation. They'd brought the sample in, or part of the sample that they'd used, and we went into it and we separated it and we then arranged it and got something different, more than what they brought in. We've then got this loop. They must have brought this in because I don't use shaper box like this. So they've just sidechained it so it's not on the kick, which helps us get the track louder. We've then got a cowbell loop. And again, all we've done is taken out the bottom end out of it. And we've not gone to town on all these sounds because we don't need to, because it's not a sparse record. It's really, really busy. All we've tried to do is get the loop in the bass line and get things that work with the sample and the bass line. And some of the stuff, if I remember correctly, they had a load more samples in it. We stripped out, and then suddenly the music came to life. And for me, you know, and when they realized this, making music like this isn't about the drums. It's about the sample. It's about the bass line. It's about the music. Almost every track is, besides your tech house stuff. So putting your loops and all your hi-hats and all your drums in first, you're restricting your ability. And what that does for most new producers who are making tracks like this is they're not putting in loops, right? And going, how does this work with the sample? How does this work with the bass line? Because remember, your vocal, your sample, your bass line are lead 1, lead 2, lead 3, okay? You've got your kick, your hat, and your clap, okay? They're your leads, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, they're the things that drive the track. They're the most important things. Everything else you put in, you should put in after to work and complement what you've got there. The problem you've got is people hear a loop that they really like, and I did it, you know, as part of my journey of learning. Oh, I really love that. And what they're not doing is they realize, oh, that's a really nice loop, and that's a really good loop in the sample, but they're not working together. And this is really important. So always do your music first in any track. I talk about this about mixing for a mindset for mixing and production in one of my subtone courses, where always start with a lead and then work around that, and you'll always have a better track, specifically when it comes to groove and feeling. And a lot of these disco tracks don't have this nowadays because people have started off with the drums and the loops, and then they put a sample in it. It just doesn't quite gel, you know, in my opinion. So that's your drums. We haven't done much with it. We wanted to keep it raw. We've not even compressed all the drums here, you know, in a bus together. We've just put them in and we've liked them and gone, right, that's okay. If I thought it needed some compression and we really liked it, we would have done it. But, you know, there's a sample running all the way through this track. And we really like what it was doing. We probably would have tried some compression, but we've not used it. And that's the drums. We've gone through the sample. We've then got the vocals. So we've got the one bit of vocal that we liked.
And young affection gapes to be his head. And young affection gapes to be his head. And young.
So we didn't want to go too mad on the vocal, just wanted a bit of a loop. That was the bit that we liked. We also found a couple of other parts, like this.
Weak Montague, I love you. Weak Montague, I love you. Weak Montague.
We've got that, which we only use in the build-up, and then we use this. And we took it out, and, you know, that's all it needed. Let's have a look at these other parts. The main hook.
And young affection gapes to the beat.
And then I think this is just Your Affection.
And young affection.
And that's it. You know, it didn't need anything more, but we could have got a lot more out of this if we wanted to, okay? So what have we done on that lead vocal? On the lead vocal, we've filtered it and automated the volume, because obviously we've volumed down the break, so we've volumed it up there. And then what we've done is added some delay, some echo boy on the ends there to carry the vocals on. And EQ8, we've done the output gain and the frequency. So it builds up, as we just heard then. And then I did a couple of reverse vocals just to add a little bit more to it. So what I've done there is I've got the first note of this part of the vocal, and I've added a massive reverb, 100% mix, and then I've reversed it. I've led it into the vocal, and then all I've done is I panned it using Shaper Box. There's no EQ on that because I would have EQ'd it before I froze and flattened the reverb vocal. So that's a Rev Vox. And then what I've done is I've got this. So I found a part of the vocal and I've put it into a simpler, and then I've changed it to a sampler, okay, for this reason, and looped it and sidechained it. But it's got a massive reverb on it to make it feel a bit more continuous, because there wasn't a long note. A lot of time you use like a that they're singing, ignore that, and just loop that bit where you've got a sustained note. But in this case, we didn't have a sustained note. So what I had to do was just add a lot of reverb and effects just to make it feel that it was a bit more continuous. I've then sidechained that using Duck. Quite aggressive, just standard stuff that you hear in this kind of stuff. And then I wanted to make it really wide. I didn't want it in the middle, so I've gone to 98% on that, which is really wide. We've then sidechained that to the lead vocal. So when the vocal's in, that's coming down in volume. So how did we do this? So what we did was this, okay? We got a sample. We found the part that we liked. So what I've done is I've converted the simpler to sampler by right-clicking on the top and going simpler to sampler. And the reason why I put it into sampler is this, is that I want that loop bit, but I want it going backwards and forwards all the time. So in sampler, what you can do is you can bring it in. Okay, if you go to sustain mode, and you press this, and what that will do will create a section where it will go backwards and forwards until the MIDI information runs out, and then it will start again from this point. So when the MIDI starts, it starts here, goes all the way to the end, but if the MIDI note's still carrying on, it goes backwards and forwards until the MIDI note hits again, or the MIDI note stops, okay? So we do that, and then there's usually a bit of a click, which is probably why we've added the reverb. And then you've got a crest fade here, so just put the crossfade on. And then it sounds like this. And you can see when the MIDI stops and starts, it does it. It takes a bit, it's a bit messy. You've got to mess around with it. You've got to really find the point where there's no clicks. And that's how you create that. It's just something we've done for years. It's a lot easier now. And in Ableton, this is brilliant to do. And like I said, this actually is a looper vocal. But if you've got a chopper vocal, you can put a reverb on it 100% like we did with the reverse vocal. Add a delay, just make it seem more continuous. Bounce it down, bring it into here and do the same thing, okay? We've EQ'd it to fit the mix. And we can see we've automated the high cut on this to work with the track. Again, another layer to the journey within the track. And what else have we done to that? We've volumed it within the sampler. Tried an echo, not use that. Just use the Valhalla reverb, the duck, the wider, and the track spacer. And if you listen to the track without this, seems a bit too clean, doesn't it? You add this in and then it makes it feel more like these tracks that you hear. And obviously this music is pumping a lot of the time and it gives that pumping feel, you know, and most of these tracks you'll hear something like that in these kind of tracks, okay? So that's the vocal sample. I didn't obviously use that there. I've been messing around trying to get some of the chops out. So we did use a sampler, as you can see here. I'll delete that. And then we've got what the guys call it texture. I call it the effects bus, but they call it texture. And they came in with one reverse, one white noise, and that was it. So we tried to make it a bit different. We added more fills and more effects, and look at it now, we've got what? 44. We've got like another 18 effects. So they came in with like 3. You've got to make your journey interesting. And this is another thing is we don't want the same reverses all the time. We don't want the same impacts and effects and everything else. So you've got to go through them and really do things that are different. Sometimes they're in 4 times, sometimes they're in twice, sometimes they're in 5, sometimes they're in twice, sometimes they're in 8, 9 times, and so on and so on. And they're all different sounds and different effects. And you can hear that they've just made it sound a little bit different. And they've programmed a Shepherd riser, which is this. And what a Shepherd riser is you do it with MIDI, but you have a riser come in, not one with a blip in the beginning like this. And then as it's rising, another one comes in underneath, okay? Like you could hear then. And as it's rising, another one comes in beneath, and so on. And then what happens is this one runs out, but the volume comes down because the volume of the one below it is rising higher. It feels like it's just continuously rising and rising and rising. And you hear this all the time. You know, it's tracks like Hatira's Space Invader was famous for this one. And there's just been a record out on Tool Room that's just by Hatira's that did the same thing. Harichuchu Ramirez's Revolt, which is one of my favorite tracks of all time. That's got a big, what's called a shepherd's tone riser throughout it. I wouldn't do it this way. Listen, it worked. And there's a bit of a blip in there, which you can't hear in the track, so it doesn't actually matter. But yeah, that's what a shepherd tone riser is. And then we added white noise, sidechained, and just went through all the different effects. So let's have a listen to a few of the effects. You see the different textures and different feelings throughout the track. You don't just want the same one. And it makes your track more interesting. And especially when an A&R's listen to your record and they just think it's just painted by numbers. This isn't painted by numbers anymore. That was one of the key things about with these guys. You're saying, okay, what more can we do? Like you get to the track and you do it. And what more can we do with this sample? Right, let's look back at the sample. Oh, well, what about this guitar bit? Okay, what about halving, you know, the loop size in the beginning and the end, and then doubling it in the break so it opens up with more emotion? Okay, great. What about using other bits of vocal? Let's go into the vocal and look at it. What about, you know, getting the track and separating the stems so we can do more with the vocal? You know, for example, reverse a vocal, sidechain it for the big R pumping to give you that feeling that you're getting within the track. So making it more interesting is in the detail. And you can see there's quite a lot going on in this track. So, you know, there's lots of effects. And on the texture bus, we've not done anything because we've low cut a lot of the energy out, specifically on the hits that are on the one, basically to do with mixing for loudness. Because remember, when we're hitting the master limiter, we want headroom. We want our tracks to be as loud as possible without them breaking up, even though most tracks break up nowadays that you hear in the Beatport charts. But I don't want that. I want my tracks to be loud, and I want my tracks so that people can listen to them in earbuds over and over and over again. And I want them to feel groove. So I take all the energy out of these sounds that I'm not feeling, I'm only hearing. Because remember, some things I want to feel the air pump out of the speakers. That's the kick. That's the bass. Sometimes it's like if you've got a piano, they're the things that I want to feel, the kick and the bass. They're what make my body move and my body groove. My ears, white noise and everything else, that's not what's hitting me in the chest. That's what my ears are hearing and making me perceive to feel that that part is lifting up. So I don't need all those frequencies at the bottom end that are moving there. And of course, we EQ it in the mix and we do it compared to everything else in the mix. that's it. Okay, and then we've got the pre-master, which I call the pre-master, and we've just gained it. So as you can see here, I've just turned down the volumes before the drop, so that when the drop hits, there's more of an impact. And too many people get this wrong because they have this massive build-up and then the drop comes in and there's a drop in energy. This will always help you do that. You know, working on the individual items beforehand is going to help more, but doing it this way really helps just feel like, oh, we'll lift it. You don't want to hear it go up in volume massively, but you want to feel the drop needs to hit you. And this is a little trick to help you do it. That's minus 2.14, which is quite a lot, but for this track, it obviously needed it. There's a lot of build-ups in it. What else have we done? Endless Smile, simple, easy. You know, it's, you know what it is. Everybody uses it. It's delays, reverbs, low cut, all in one. Helps that energy within it. It's lazy, but it works. And it's not massive. You know, we're only at, what, 50% now. So we're not overdoing the effect. And that's the pre-master. So what's the pre-master? That means, like, if this track got signed, we could send it off to someone and then they might want to master it themselves. You always do a pre-master. Now, in this instance, we didn't. So what happened here was I then ran it through the modular channel and I did some parallel compression, some parallel saturation, a bit of EQ. We then went into the Marg EQ and we really pushed the bottom end, which is, I actually mixed into these when I was mixing it. So a big boost at 40 Hertz and a bit more sub. So it sounds, sometimes putting a mix through a piece of kit like this and just boosting the bottom end and the top end like a smiley face can make a massive difference to a track where you think, oh, I'm missing a bit of bottom end. It worked in this instance. Not always, but it worked. So EQ with the Marg, parallel compression, parallel saturation, give it a bit more of that analog feel. And I can't remember what we did with it, but boosting it with the EQ. So I then went through all this and then clipped it in the Prism, because the analog clipping will give us a bit more headroom, meaning that I can clip it more without it breaking up than using a digital clipper. Okay. And then what we do is we bounce it down. And as you can see here, we bounce it down. I'm going to zoom in to the drop. We've clipped it, not too much, but it's not flatlined it. Okay. So we've done that. And then what I've done is mastered it. So what have I done for mastering? So for the mastering, I used Gold Clip. I used the modern settings for these two, and I pushed into it, added a bit of gold in Alchemy. I'm going to go into this plugin more in my Mixing for Loudness course, which is coming. I've added Gold False Master, which helps, you know, it looks for frequencies it thinks it needs to add or take away and recover. And it's, let's have a look what it's doing. Only very slightly, 3.4%. It just does some magic, this plugin. But sometimes it can mess around with your phase, so you've got to be very, very careful for it. And then I've used Ozone 12, a bit of low end focus. So again, I've added a bit more punch to the low end with the low end focus. I've then give it a bit more volume again with the bass control at 0.7. And I've tried to make it more punchy. And the reason why I've done that is I want, obviously it's going to be using the kick in the bass here. I want to feel that groove a little bit more. I want the transients and the kick in the bass in there. That's probably why I did that. I've then got an exciter for some reason, even though we've used the modular channel. And I've given it a bit of tape between 824 and 2.9. And just get a bit more excitement in the mid-range. And then I've used the maximizer just to bring it up to volume. I was doing 0.1 limiting on it because we'd already got the volume, a lot of the volume with parallel saturation and parallel compression. Again, I go deep into this in my Mixing for Loudness course on subtone, but that's a big key thing to get it loud. Plus, we'd also use the clippers, remember, on the kick and the clap, and the combination of clipping the key elements that were peaking out the most, which we're going to hit the limiter first, and then using parallel saturation and compression on the whole mix, gave us the loudness that we needed. You know, we then went into the gold clip. I can't play it because of the CPU, it crashes the track. So when I mastered this, obviously all the plugins in the pre-master were muted because we were only mastering the submix. So with all the plugins I've got on the master bus, Ableton doesn't like it, so I can't play it back to you. But yeah, just a bit of excitement between 8.2.4 and 2.9. The maximizer was just tickling it. We weren't really doing much to it. We'd already done all the hard work to get it loud. IRC5, I love this for getting things loud. Character was down to there. And the thing is what happened was the maximizer was doing like 0.1 or 0.2 or limiting. And the reason for that was we could have pushed this track harder, okay? But when we went into Metric AB and referenced, you know, a lot of the big tracks on like Who Plays and Tool Room and Fool's Paradise, it was as loud. So we didn't need to make it louder, and they don't want to destroy the track. And this is what a lot of people do who come to me. They've added limiters and clippers and they've taken away from the punch and the dynamics of the track by killing the transients. And you don't need to do that a lot of the time, specifically on the master bus. The gold clips just caught stuff on it. And as you can see, when we did it, it was only doing 0.7 dB clipping, which is not a lot at all. And that was soft clipping. So we've done that. And then I've used this plugin. So this plugin is the Chris Geringer CG2. And it helps make things loud by saturation as opposed to slicing and limiting and destroying the mix more. It only needs a little bit and you can take a track up by an extra, you know, 1L or 2L UFS just by adding this. I think it's like a saturation and density. It's an amazing plugin. It's expensive, but I find it less destructive for adding a bit of loudness. Yes, it's adding saturation in. Yes, it's possibly taking away from the transients a little bit, but that's where you have to use your ears. You have to see, like, what's it doing to my mix? Is it better or is it worse? It doesn't have an auto gain. It doesn't have a level match, which, you know, whilst you're learning, you might want to create your own rack that does that to hear what it's doing. But because my ears are experienced, I can hear what it's doing. So a little can go a very long way on this plugin. And then I've just dithered that, ready for export. So here's my master. And I'm going to put it in there. And let's have a look what we're hitting. So hitting minus 7.2 LUFS, we're not destroying it. It was louder than Second Story, which is one of their references by Mark Knight. It was the same volume as Creator, which absolutely rocks. It was much louder than their other reference, Giving Up, but it wasn't as loud as the Armand van Helden track. But we agreed that that one was we didn't like how loud it was because of what the loudness was doing to the track and the top end. We wanted to make it so that we could listen to it. So we made a decision to have it not quite as loud to perceived loudness, but in our creative way, we preferred the mix to it, and we found it easier to listen to. There's no right and there's no wrong. There's a, you know, when I heard that track originally, I remember hearing it and thinking it's a bit heavy on the ears and it's got a big kick and we don't really get the groove of the sample to it. And I thought, I don't get it, because I'm all about groove and feeling it and dancing to the music. And then I played it in a club and it's got this big kick, like I said to you before, and not really lots of bass if it's that track. And when I played it in the club, the kick hit so hard, the energy went off, and the people on the dance floor going, oh, wow. So even though initially, from a mix down and an engineer point of view, I didn't understand it, as soon as I heard it in a club, I went, right, I get it. It's got the big vocal hook that you use your ears for, you know, and when we talk about the air moving from the speakers, that kick just hits so hard, it's unbelievable, and is loud, you know, and is distorted. And is it right? Is it wrong? Am I right? Am I wrong? You know, what are you looking for? That's down to personal preference. But I've made some other tracks for other clients, with other clients. I've mixed their tracks, and one of them was Satisfied by Macca McArthur, which is on Let There Be House now. And this was his reference. And we took the groove out of the track with big open hats and a massive round kick, so it was going like that. And we clipped it to a point which I didn't necessarily like it. I had to turn it down without him knowing, but sorry, Mark. Where it was distorting up a little bit, but he liked it. So is it right? Is it wrong? Well, you know, some of the people I learned from will go, no, you shouldn't be doing that. You've destroyed it. You've destroyed the track. But then you listen to it in a club and you go, wow, that's amazing. It sounds fantastic. You know, if it works, it works, you know, and sometimes the DJs, they only hear the energy with their ears. They don't feel the air going like you go in the club. And when I explain this to people, A-Bing it and getting them to tune into the feeling of a track, which comes from the bottom end and the groove, they always, 90% of the time, go with the groove over it being doonch, unch, unch. You can still have a big kick and have a groove. It's how you program it. And what I hear a lot of the time is they've got this sample in there and they've got this big kick, but lots of bass, which kind of doesn't work with each other, but they've lost the groove of the track to hi-hats, you know, the kick and the hi-hats, and they're not as important. Remember, go back to what we said about before. Always start with the lead and work everything to that. You can still have that big kick for the clubs, you know, but don't overpower your groove with loads of hi-hats and loads of loops that conflict with the melody and the groove of your sample in the disco track. That's how we mixed and arranged Idiom, Your Affection. And that's how you would generally think about making a disco house track for nowadays. I'm going to put this project up, but obviously there's a lot of expensive plugins in there. So what I'll do first is I'll replace everything with an Ableton stock plugin besides the sidechain. And then hopefully you'll be able to recreate this with a different sample in your track. Obviously find new loops. I can't put the loops into MIDI, but get your sampling first, you know, and your vocal and your arrangement and your bass. You know, just use a kick, a hat and a clap. And then once you've got that, then add your loops to it and ask yourself, is this loop working with my sample? Because that's one of the biggest mistakes I see. Trust me, you want to feel the music, you know. So remember, a lot of young producers are using headphones or small speakers where they can't feel the air coming from the speakers. You know, I'm lucky enough to have a really good set of speakers that project a lot of bottom end and I can feel the music. You know, try and be able to feel your music. If you can't do it, then, you know, go to somewhere, road test it, listen to it and say, what does it feel like? Remember when you do this, that's what you feel in a club. You know, dung, 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 dung. That's the feeling you're going to get. That's the air that's going to come out of it, okay? And everything else, when you take off that subfilter, needs to work with the track. And I think that's a key takeaway. And that's identifying some of the biggest issues I see with a lot of these disco house tracks in this kind of style on Beatport. So I hope you liked it. If you're interested in mixing or mastering or producing a track like this in the studio in Manchester. All the details are in the description. I hope you liked it. And yeah, it's just a quick, well, it was supposed to be quick. It was just supposed to be a quick run through where show you how to make a track like this. And please like, share, subscribe, and let me know what else you'd like to see. I'll see you in the next one.